This message is produced by truthfromgod.com, which is one of hundreds of messages that can be read, heard, and watched at truthfromgod.com. Paul, an apostle? What does the Bible say about this man who is only mentioned in the New Testament? The first reference to this individual is when he was known by the name of Saul, who later became known by the name of Paul. The first reference to Saul is in Acts 7:58, which pertains to the stoning of Stephen. And it says, "And the Jews cast him, Stephen, out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet whose name was Saul." This account of Stephen begins in Acts 6:8 and continues all the way through to Acts 7:60 with his death. According to this verse, Saul was a young man. After Acts 7:60 begins, Acts 8:1, which says, "And Saul was consenting unto his," Stephen's, "death. And at that time there was a great persecution against the church," ecclesia, "which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles." Not only did Saul consent to the murder of Stephen by the Jews, but also believed the Jews' propaganda that this Stephen bunch should all suffer the same fate. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, ecclesia, entering into every house and hauling men and women, committing them to prison, Acts 8:3. Like all young men, Saul was full of hormones and driven by impulse. Wanting to prove himself to the Jew Sanhedrin, he became their zealous, enforcing hitman. But Yahweh God had a surprise for all concerned. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus. And suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, "Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me?" And he said, "Who art thou, Lord?" And the Lord said, "I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks." And he, trembling and astonished, said, "Lord, what wilt thou have me to do?" And the Lord said unto him, "Arise, and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do." The men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man. But they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. Acts 9:1-9. These 3 days when Saul was without sight, neither did eat nor drink, are significant and will be covered later. But this story in Acts continues with the Lord, Jesus, YAHWAH, appearing to a man named Ananias. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias? And he said, Behold, I am here, Lord. And the Lord said unto him, Arise, and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus. For behold, he prayeth and hath seen in a vision a man named Ananias coming in, and putting his hand on him, that he might receive his sight. Then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man, how much evil he hath done to thy saints at Jerusalem. And here he hath authority from the chief priests to bind all that call on thy name. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles, ethnos, nations, and kings, and the children of Israel. For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. And Ananias went his way, and entered into the house, and putting his hands on him, said, Brother Saul, the Lord, even Jesus, that appeared unto thee in the way as thou comest, hath sent me, that thou mayest receive thy sight, and be filled with the Holy Ghost. And immediately there fell from his eyes as it had been scales, he received sight forthwith, and arose, and was baptized. Acts 9:10 through 18. Now, what did this young man do? What was said about him, and who became his enemies? The answers to these questions are given as this story continues here in Acts. And when he had received meat, he was strengthened. Then was Saul certain days with the disciples which were at Damascus, and straightway he preached Christ, Messiah, anointed, in the synagogues, that he, Jesus, YAHWAH, is the Son of God. But all that heard him were amazed, and said, Is not this he that destroyed them which called on this name in Jerusalem, and come hither for that intent, that he might bring them bound unto the chief priest? But Saul increased the more in strength, and confounded the Jews which dwelt at Damascus, proving that this is very Christ. And after that many days were fulfilled, the Jews took counsel to kill him. But their lying await was known of Saul, and they watched the gate day and night to kill him. Then the disciples took him by night, and let him down by the wall in a basket. And when Saul was come to Jerusalem, he essayed to join himself to the disciples. But they were all afraid of him, and believed not that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him, and brought him to the apostles, and declared unto them how he had seen the Lord in the way, and that he had spoken to him, and how he had preached boldly at Damascus in the name of Jesus. He was with them, coming in and going out at Jerusalem. And he spake boldly in the name of the Lord Jesus, and disputed against the Grecians, Jews visiting Jerusalem, But they went about to slay him, which when the brethren knew, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him forth to Tarsus. Acts 9:19 through 30. There is no reference made of Saul again until Barnabas is sent from Jerusalem to Antioch to check out what God was doing in the nations. The Bible tells about what was going on, and that Barnabas was a good man and full of the Holy Ghost and of faith, and much people were added unto the Lord. Then departed Barnabas to Tarsus for to seek Saul, and when he had found him, he brought him into Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church, ecclesia, and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. Then the disciples, every man according to his ability, determined to send relief unto the brethren which dwelt in Judea, which also they did, and sent it to the elders by the hands of Barnabas and Saul. Acts 11:24 through 26 and 29 through 30. While they were in Jerusalem, the word of God grew and multiplied. And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and took with them John, whose surname was Mark. Acts 12:24 through 25. According to Acts 13:1, there were in Antioch prophets and teachers, and Saul is listed as one of them. Now, after these men had fasted, the Holy Ghost said, Separate me Barnabas and Saul for the work whereunto I have called them. And when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. Acts 13:2 through 3. They traveled to several places where they preached the word of God, and finally came to Paphos, where the deputy of the country, Sergius Paulus, a prudent man, who called for Barnabas and Saul, and desired to hear the word of God. Acts 13:7. According to verse 9, it was while here that Saul's name was changed to Paul. And the name Saul is never used again except when Paul is retelling what Jesus had said to him in the blinding light when he was on the way to Damascus. What else does the New Testament say about Paul? On his final trip back to Jerusalem, the Jews, wanting to kill him, whipped the people into such a frenzy that the Roman chief captain had to intervene and take Paul into protective custody. He then asked Paul if he was an Egyptian. Paul replied, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. Acts 21:39. It is with this verse that much confusion about Paul begins. Here he is not making a statement about his racial ancestry, which he explicitly details in other places. In this passage, the Greek word Judeos, which the King Jimmy Boys translated Jew, is a geographical word in the strict sense of a territorial location, a country. They even translate it elsewhere as Judea. For all those who seriously study the Bible, It should be noted that even Strong's Concordance will give this word a non-racial definition. The chief captain was surprised that Paul spoke Greek and realized that this man was well educated and must be of some substance, so when Paul asked him if he could address the people, he gave him his permission. Paul said to the crowd, I am verily a man, which am a Jew, Judeos, Judean, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. Acts 22:3. Now, who was this Gamaliel that Paul was brought up at the feet of? From Acts 5:34, it is known that he was a member of the Sanhedrin, council, a Pharisee, a doctor of law, and had in reputation among all the people. Paul was well trained in the religion of his day. He had been taught by Mr. Guru himself, and was seen as an up-and-comer by the council, as well as the high priest muckety-muck themselves. Paul uses the Greek word hudeos many times, which is translated Jew in the King James Version of the Bible, but the word itself has no racial implied meaning. The context of the verse in which it is used will give the racial information. It is only Judaized Christianity that wants to put a racial spin on just the word itself. All things bearing the name Christian eat the same hog slop served up in the Jew trough called the Round Table Conference of Christians and Jews. The putrefying effectiveness of this will is seen as 1/3 of the world's population regurgitates its Judeo-Christian heritage vomit. It is from Judaism that all Christianity sprang, and its satanic racial doctrine that the Jews are of God, his chosen people, the Israel of the Bible, that the rest of mankind are the children of the devil, Gentile, Goyim. Christianism embraces and gives the synagogue of Satan the preeminence and relegates all others to a heap of garbage, all the while ignoring the very words of Christ that the Jews are not of God, but are of their father the devil, John 8:44. This Christian creature is nothing but the beast of Revelation 13:11, which looked lambish, but its message is satanic through and through. Look at its fruits. As Christianity increases, so does evil. What would the world be like if 1/3 of its population was righteous instead of Christian? Don't be flim-flammed by the masters of deception about the meaning of Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew, Judeos, first, and also to the Greek, Hellen. There is no racial connotation here, but just a simple historical geography lesson as to the location where the gospel started, which was in Judea, and then how it spread into the other regions by going through the Greek nations on its way to Rome and into all of Europe. As far as the Bible is concerned, there would be no account of this ordered movement without the writings of Paul. There was a God-dictated direction as to where the gospel of Christ was to be sent. Nothing that Yahweh does is by accident, coincidence, or happenstance. He is in control of all things, and they are brought about according to his preordained purpose. Now when they, Paul and Silas, had gone throughout Phrygia and the region of Galatia, and were forbidden of the Holy Ghost to preach the word in Asia, after they were come to Mysia, they essayed to go into Bithyny, but the Spirit suffered them not, and they, passing by Mysia, came down to Troas. And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia, and prayed him, saying, Come over into Macedonia and help us. And after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia, assuredly gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them. Acts 16:6-10. Contrary to Christianism, the book of Acts is not the book of the Acts of the Apostles, but it is the book of the Acts of Yahweh God. Everything is ordered by his predestinated plan, and even if man sets out to go one place, it is Yahweh that takes him where he wants him to go. This is true whether it was with Jonah or Paul, and neither missed God's destination for them. But one thing is always fixed and absolute, and it is that Yahweh does the choosing. Every time that man tries to usurp the choosing thing, he's always trumped by God. Here is a little reminder for the Christian world. No one chooses Jesus. Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, Murmur not among yourselves. No man can come unto me except the Father, which hath sent me, draw him. And I will raise him up at the last day. And he said, Therefore said I unto you, that no man can come unto me, except it were given unto him of my Father. Jesus answered them, Have not I chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? John 6:43-44, 65, and 70. This may be an ego buster, and it is certainly a Christianity destroyer, but no one accepts, believes in, or chooses Jesus. Yahweh does the giving of faith, belief, He does the drawing, and he does the choosing. It is only a flesh-driven, ego-controlled mind that could come up with such a perverted concept that man's free will is sovereign to God's preordained purpose. Paul had no such Christian concept, but the very opposite. If you do not believe this statement, then read what he wrote. It is God that calls, justifies, and glorifies. Romans 8:30. It is God that predestinates. Romans 8:29. It is God that elects. Romans 9:11. It is God that is doing his will and good pleasure. Philippians 2:13. It is God that accepts us. Ephesians 1:6. It is God that gives us faith and belief. Romans 12:3, Galatians 3:23, Ephesians 1:19, and 2:8 through 9. It is God that keeps us in hope of eternal life, which he promised before the world began. Titus 1:2. It is God that chose us before the foundation of the world. Ephesians 1:4. Furthermore, it is God that wrote our names in the book of life, which was before the foundation of the world. Revelation 17:8. Answer this, all you Christians. What did man's free will have to do with any of this? Nothing, according to Paul. Is this the reason that there are those who want his writings ripped from the Bible? Or are they just so flesh-driven and their egos so inflated that they want to be in charge? Does their blindness fixate them on performing some wonderful work which makes them good to go? Is there any glory to Yahweh God in their muddled mind? Or is it their glory because of what they choose to do or not to do? Here are a few more facts from the Bible. Paul said, "For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin." Romans 11:1. Can any of you prove beyond question a statement as to what tribe of Israel from which you are descended? Oh, by the way, did any of his contemporaries ever question one thing he said? You know, Peter, John, James, Philip, Andrew, Barnabas, Jude, the disciples, the apostles, or a host of others. What would you accusers know 2,000 years after the fact that these men who associated with Paul did not know? Where is your chapter and verse? Or is it simply an acceptance of things whereby any of your pronouncements become holy writ, and the new improved concoction of some kind of Christian Kool-Aid? Where is anyone with a declaration from Jesus about who you are? Remember what Jesus told the Paul-hating Ananias? "Go thy way, for he," Paul, "is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles, ethnos, nations, and kings, and the children of Israel. For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. Acts 9:16. We learn even more about Paul in his writing to the Philippians. Beware of dogs. Beware of evil workers. Beware of the concision. For we are the circumcision which worship God in spirit and rejoice in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh, though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he hath wherewith he might trust in the flesh, I more, circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, ecclesia, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. Philippians 3:2-7. Who today can present these credentials and have none of your contemporaries question such statements? Which of you, holier than thou Bible destroyers, can come close to making the following declaration? Are they ministers of Christ? I am more in labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequent, in deaths oft. Of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. Thrice was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day I have been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness, in painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness, beside those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches, ecclesia. Who is weak, and I am not weak? Who is offended, and I burn not? If I must needs glory, I will glory of the things which concern my infirmities. 2 Corinthians 11:23-30. How do you think the Corinthians answered this question from Paul? Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? 1 Corinthians 9:1. From where did his apostleship come? Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. 2 Timothy 1:1. No, this did not come from the cowardly disciples still in the upper room, who were drawing straws to pick someone to replace Judas. Is not it interesting that they picked 2 men and told God to choose one or the other? Was not the selection process a man's contrived scheme? Here, God, you can pick this one or that one, which we've already chosen for you, and will determine the whole matter by a game of chance, casting lots. How flesh-driven does it get? This is man's demon child democracy in action. Oops! Did I stomp on the religious toes of the Catholics, the Baptists, the Methodists, and the other 30,000 plus Christian denominations? Who in such a flesh-driven concoction of men would ever dare to wait upon Yahweh God? Now, if it was God's plan to replace Judas, then why would he not fill the position with who he wanted? Christianism says, oh, no, we have to do God's work for him. These same disciples who ran away from Jesus, hid out in the upper room, would not dare go ask Pilate for the body of Jesus, were too fearful to bury him. They would not even venture out to the tomb until the women assured them that it was empty, are now going to do God's work for him. Understand that they had not been endued with the power of the Holy Spirit at this time, for the day of Pentecost did not come. Read about this selection fiasco in Acts 1:15 through 26. And it would not be until later in Acts 2:1 where it says that the day of Pentecost was fully come. Jesus had even told Peter, when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. Luke 22:32. These disciples are running on a full tank of flesh fuel and not spirit powered. And so the guy who won their little lottery enterprise, Matthias, is never heard of again in the Bible. It was the raised again Jesus, YAHWAH Christ, the anointed Messiah, that appeared to and spoke with Paul and gave instructions to Ananias. The disciples, or any other man, had nothing to do with this revelation and selection of God. In the beginning of this message, it was mentioned that the 3 days when Paul was without sight and neither did eat nor drink are significant. Understand the importance of 3 days and its link to death. How long was Jonah in the great fish and Jesus, YAHWAH, in the tomb? Going one step further, what did Jesus, YAHWAH, tell the thief on the cross? Jesus said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. Luke 23:43. Paul was as a dead man, and also was caught up to paradise during this time. Know the facts and read 2 Corinthians 12:1 through 5. It is not expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago. Whether in the body, I cannot tell, or whether out of the body, I cannot tell, God knoweth. Such an one caught up to the third heaven, and I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell, God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise, and heard unspeakable words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. Of such an one will I glory. Yet of myself I will not glory, but in my infirmities. Don't be confused by the King Jimmy boy's botched translation of these verses. First, strip out the added notes, which are in parentheses. Then remove the indefinite articles, of which Greek had none. The word translated in is also rendered with, and many other things could be mentioned about this confusing rendering of the Koine Greek into English, but what is simply said is that Paul knew this man that was taken into the third heaven, paradise, by the Lord, and while he was there, he heard things that could never be put into any language known to man. Now, if what was said could not be conveyed by any conventional language, then how did Paul know about this, except he was that man? Does not he say that he is going to talk about visions and revelations of the Lord? He's talking about those that were given him. And yes, he knew this man well, for he was him. He not only starts out and ends up by talking about the glory of this event that did not occur because of anything that he had done, but was all the Lord's doing, and he would glory in him and his power, while also glorying in his own weakness. This revelation, like the Apostle John's, was life-changing for Paul, which even 14 years later he would tell to the Corinthians. It is also significant that Paul was of the tribe of Benjamin. Why? Remember Genesis 28, 1 through 28, when Jacob was blessed by Isaac and sent to his mother's brother's Laban's house to live and to marry into this lineage. On this journey, he spent the night at a place which he named Bethel, and he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of stones of that place and put them for his pillows, and laid down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed. And behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. Behold, the angels of God, Elohim, ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord YAHWAH stood above it, and said, I am the Lord YAHWAH God Elohim of Abraham thy father, the God Elohim of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord YAHWAH is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, Elohim, and this is the gate to heaven. He called the name of the place Bethel. Genesis 28:11 through 13, 16 through 17, and 19. After 20 years living with Laban, Yahweh told Jacob to leave and return back to his homeland. On his way back home with his 4 wives and 11 sons, Jacob stopped again at Bethel, and it was here that God changed his name to Israel. And it was after this that his last son was born, who he named Benjamin, which means son of the right hand. Realize the fact that Jacob had 11 sons, but Israel had only 1. Is it not interesting that the first king of Israel was not only of the tribe of Benjamin, but also was named Saul? Yahweh has always done more than meets the eye. These things are mysteries which he must reveal, or they will never be understood. Okay, here it is. Saul, whose name was changed to Paul, was of the tribe of Benjamin, and was the last one born into the rank of disciple, apostle, according to the plan of Yahweh, and by the appearing of YAHWAH. Paul understood the meaning of all this, which he states in 1 Corinthians 15:8. And last of all he, Jesus, YAHWAH, was seen of me also, as of one born out of due time. He was not chosen at the same time as the other disciples. Also, in the nation of Israel, Benjamin was the least in size of all the tribes. Is not this Paul's confession about being an apostle? For I am the least of the apostles, that am not meant to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church, ecclesia, of God. 1 Corinthians 15:9. There is no arrogance or self-exaltation in this statement. Unto me, who am less than the least of all saints, is this grace given, that I should preach among the Gentiles, ethnos, nations, the unsearchable riches of Christ. Ephesians 3:8. Do you think this man would go around with some bogus title like Dr. Paul? What value did he put on his seminary Pharisaical training? I count all things but lost, and do count them but dung. Philippians 3:8. But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached of me is not after man, for I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Galatians 1:11 through 12. Yes, he got his discipleship, apostleship, and revelation from Jesus, just like the other 11, even though he was not chosen at the same time with them, but he was chosen by the same one who called and instructed them. Again, no one challenged any of Paul's statements. There is never one innuendo from anyone about the legitimacy of Paul's discipleship, apostleship, authority, and revelation from Jesus Christ. After Jesus appeared to him and Ananias came to him, where did he go? Galatians 1:15 through 19 says, "But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, and called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the heathen ethnos nations. Immediately I conferred not with flesh and blood, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia, and returned again into Damascus. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter, and abode with him 15 days. But others of the apostles saw I none, save James, the Lord's brother." Peter and James had a personal knowledge of the young man, Paul, who visited them after what had transpired in his life 3 years earlier. The same power of Yahweh that changed Paul resonated within Peter and James, for they were given the discernment as to the validity of this young man as a chosen vessel of God. They understood completely that he was to go to the nations with the message about the coming of Christ, the anointed Messiah, and the work finished in him. Although being a young man, Peter and James did not see him as one beneath them. Paul's stature of power was what they perceived within their own spirit, and no flesh ego would ever come into play in their relationship with this ordained man of God. Peter got a good dose of Paul's authority, never opened his mouth, and took the rebuke according to Galatians 2:11. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. What was Peter's attitude toward Paul after this dressing down? Well, guess what? Peter spake of our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. 2 Peter 3:15 through 16. Did you pay attention to the fact that Peter was familiar with all of Paul's epistles? Is it not obvious when he says, as also in all his, Paul's epistles? Also it is they that are unlearned and unstable that try not only to twist and pervert Paul's writings, but also do the same thing to the other scriptures. In these verses, Peter gives Paul's epistles the same ranking with the other scriptures. As Peter said, there are those who are unlearned, ignorant, know nothing, and unstable, not established in the truth, have no revelation, and they wrest, twist and turn the scriptures into perversions, lies, and distortions, which will bring about their own destruction. According to Peter, all those who want to evict Paul from the Bible will be destroyed. These are the ones handling the word of God deceitfully, and are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. No marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it's no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. 2 Corinthians 11:13 through 15. Destroying Paul's apostleship would mean doing away with all the New Testament, for the writers of it were the elders assembled at Jerusalem, who bore witness of Paul's status by calling him brother and beloved. Acts 15:4 through 27. Now, who was it that hated him then? It was the Jews that followed him from city to city, crying out, "These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also." Acts 17:6. And it is the Jews and their thugs that are still ranting and wailing to get him evicted from the Bible. The onslaught upon the fundamental principles of the oracles of Yahweh is growing at an exponential rate in the end of this present age, and if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived by these dressed up, pious-sounding, slithering snakes with their false doctrines and Christ. Matthew 24:24. Know this, O Elohim, all you children of Yahweh, as you were with your Father in heaven, he is with you in the earth. No weapon that is formed against you will succeed. No snare will entrap you. No pit dug will cause your downfall. He that has begun a good work in you will complete it, because he is the author and finisher of our faith. He will never abandon you or forsake you. You're more precious to him than anything in heaven or earth. It is apparent from all the attacks upon Yahweh's word coming from every quarter that this present evil age is coming to an end. As turmoil and chaos intensifies, look up, for your redemption draws nearer. And you know this, little flock, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. We have a glorious destiny that was preordained before we ever came into earth, and the travail at the end time will bring forth the man-child, all grown up into mature sons of Yahweh, who will make up that body of administration for our Father's kingdom in earth. We are now being transformed from glory to glory. This present life is being changed by the vibrating, living power of the Spirit into that which has a whole new meaning. Where once dwelt fear, and anxiety. Now comes forth a flood tide of rejoicing praise to Yahweh Father, and it lifts us up to the heights of heaven. Just as Paul was an apostle, chosen by Yahweh, and separated from his mother's womb for the great calling of God, so are all you Elohim, children of God, whom he also placed into that same body of the anointed administrators of his divine kingdom in earth. As Psalms 100 says, let us make a joyful noise unto Yahweh our Father. Let us serve Yahweh our God with gladness. Let us come before his presence with singing. Let us enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and let us go into his courts with praise. Let us be thankful unto him, and bless the name of Yahweh Almighty, for he has prepared such a fabulous future for us, which is beyond our wildest expectations. Rejoice. Again I say, rejoice. Lift up the heart and head, for thy God reigneth. This message is produced by truthfromgod.com, which is one of hundreds of messages that can be read, heard, and watched at truthfromgod.com.